I've spent most of my career either litigating cases or teaching law. And out of that experience, I've learned some approaches and postures and techniques toward navigating hard disagreements. And I think they're applicable to families and friendships as well.
Welcome to the Jesus Storybook Bible Podcast, a place where we remind you that grace can rewrite any story, that hope shines a light through our darkest moments, and that God's love changes lives. Here's your host, New York Times bestselling author, Sally Lloyd Jones.
Hello, I'm Sally Lloyd Jones, author of the Jesus Storybook Bible, which tells the story of God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. Welcome to the show. In a culture that is so often divisive and argumentative, how can we be gracious with people when they're quite different from us, believe different things, and we disagree with them? Our guest today says there is a way, by truly listening. Our guest is a professor of law and religion, and he shares how his training as a lawyer has equipped him to navigate disagreements with grace. He shares how the characteristics of a good lawyer can serve us all in our daily lives, namely, the importance of asking the good and hard questions and being really present for the answers. He also shares what we can learn when we stop viewing people as interruptions and instead see them as the image bearers of God that they are. John Inazu is the Sally D. Danforth Distinguished Professor of Law and Religion at Washington University in St. Louis. He teaches criminal law, law and religion, and various First Amendment courses. He writes and speaks frequently about pluralism, assembly, free speech, religious freedom, and other issues. He's written 3 books and published opinion pieces in the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, USA Today, Newsweek, and CNN. He's also the founder of the Carver Project and the Legal Vocation Fellowship, and is a senior fellow with Interfaith America. For our guest today, I would use the word gracious. Gracious in the dictionary is defined as kind, courteous, compassionate, and is characterized by generosity of spirit. Theologian and author E. Stanley Jones once said this: "We grow small trying to be great." God, of course, does things the other way round. The word gracious is actually the most often used of God throughout the Bible. In Hebrew, gracious means to bend down or stoop in kindness. Psalm 18 says that God stoops down to make us great. E. Stanley Jones, again, he said, "You cease to move into yourself away from others. You give up your antagonism. You begin to move toward others in love. God moved toward you in gracious, outgoing love, and you move towards others in that same outgoing love." Our conversation today reminds me of that famous quote, variously attributed to Philo, Plato, and Socrates. But whoever said it, it goes like this: "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle." What an honor to hear from John. He's filled with grace. He shares so honestly and humbly with us, and I know you'll be as blessed by his wisdom and insight as I was. He also talks about how a story in the Jesus Storybook Bible showed him how his training as a lawyer could be a liability in terms of his personal and faith life. But I'll let him tell you about that. So, without further ado, please welcome my friend, and now yours, John Inazu.
My name is John Inazu, and I am a law professor at Washington University in St. Louis. I teach both law students and undergraduates courses related to law, religion, and politics. One of the key pieces about being a lawyer is that you're not going to be any good unless you really understand the other side's argument. And that means having the best possible case of that argument, the most empathetic version and construct of that argument, and understanding why someone who's smart and kind and decently good might have a different view of something than you do. And that's a lot of what the law is about. And that requires careful reading and careful listening, requires asking good questions and not jumping to conclusions. I think it's the kind of thing that can help us around the dinner table and in the neighborhood association and other settings like that. I'm a type A, efficiency-driven person, and it's very easy for me to go through my day and just see people as interruptions or slowing me down. Can we pause and realize that in front of us, whether it's a colleague or a student or a neighbor or the person at the grocery store or the post office or the driver's license office, that these are all complex human beings, image bearers who are carrying a lot in this world. And even though they might just make up a few seconds of your day, that your encounter with them is an important part of their experience in the world. I think of that C.S. Lewis quote that you've never met a mere mortal, and everyone we encounter, we're kind of pushing toward glory or away from it. And can we take that seriously and slow down? And instead of undesired interruptions or problems, can we learn to be present with the people around us? I'm not particularly good at this all the time. I can default into my get things done mode, but when I'm thinking about it, this is what I want to do better in life. I think actually core to Christian engagement in the world today is a willingness to not only ask hard questions, but be asked hard questions, where the people we encounter want first to know that we care about them as human beings, that we take their ideas seriously, that we're not so locked up in our own beliefs that we can't even listen to other people. And so I think that when we start from a place of confidence that lets us engage fully with the people we encounter, that's more genuine, it's more authentic, it's more invitational, and it's a way to bring people into deeper relationship with us. And I think that's really what we're called to be as Christians. We're not just spouting off statements, but we're embodying a way of being in the world. And through that embodiment is how we convey who Jesus is. We can be both very confident in our own beliefs, as Christians are called to be, and also recognize the differences of beliefs around us. In other words, we're living in this pluralistic society where there are a lot of differences and they're not going away. We don't have to be frightened by those differences or anxious about them. We can be in the world and be different in who we are and understand the differences around us, even if it means we're not going to agree with everyone we encounter. And I think it's important to have both of these together. The kind of confidence we have with our own beliefs makes us secure enough to be around people who are different, to ask hard questions. And I think we've got a pretty good model of that in the life and story of Jesus. He asked good questions. He interrupted contexts in surprising ways, and he wasn't afraid to be around people who turned heads. You know, there he goes with the tax collectors or the sinners, the prostitutes, and that wasn't a big deal for Jesus. And I think that allows a kind of embodied presence that more of us need to start to follow. If your goal is to try to convince someone that you've got the better position, whether that's about a matter of faith or politics or something else, it's going to be very hard to do it if all you're doing is speaking and not listening. So the pragmatic approach to persuading someone is to enter into their thinking, to use language and ideas and concepts that are accessible to them, and not try to wall ourselves off as something that someone else has to try to understand. We should make translation as easy as possible. To embody the fruits of the Spirit and the habits and practices of becoming more and more like Christ. These are not easy tasks, and they take work. And it's very hard to work on these hard tasks like learning patience and learning and practicing humility and practicing listening. It's very hard to do that when you're just around people who affirm you and who like you. And so when push comes to shove, when you're with people who you might not like or who might come at you with a very different posture or tone, these are opportunities to practice these hard to learn habits that are ultimately the virtues that we're called to embody. But as we think about what it means to be a virtuous person, often the work of virtue only comes through really hard practice sessions and really hard experiences. And when we work on those with people who aren't like us, it not only helps our own character and improvement, but it also helps us figure out how to relate better across disagreement. I think at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to fake authenticity, and people will pick up pretty quickly whether you're actually listening to engage with them or whether you're more performatively trying just to make your own point. And that difference, although sometimes subtle, is often what can matter the most. Our conversations with others can make a difference far beyond what we can see in our limited sight and through our limited lenses. And I as a teacher, I hear this from students from time to time, where years later, where someone will come back and they'll say, that class you taught or that conversation we had really made a difference. And it's one of the most rewarding things as a teacher to hear that. And inevitably, it's a conversation or a class that I don't even remember because it wasn't part of my plan to make the most important point, but it just happened that in that moment that resonated with the particular student. And that's how we are as people in the world. We can't game it all out or plan ahead what's going to affect people's lives. We just have to be present and faithful and do our best. When I think about God's presence and love in my life and in the world, what comes to mind most recently is just the gift that my kids are to me. I've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old. I recently had a birthday. They all three wrote me these just beautiful cards that were in their own way showing their love for me. And it was such a tangible reminder of God's love for me through my kids. And then I'm just, more generally just deeply grateful to be able to get to do what I do and to talk to people and write to people about how to be hopeful and not anxious or fearful. And it's just a gift to be able to do that. The Jesus Storybook Bible is a favorite of all of my kids, and they were formed by it and influenced by it as they were in their early years. And I love the accessibility and relational moves that Sally makes in that book. And I think it's a wonderful gift. I'll be reading from a story in the Jesus Storybook Bible called A New Way to See, where God reveals to Paul the truth was different from what he believed. Of all the people who kept the rules, Saul was the best. I'm good at being good, he'd tell you. He was very proud and very good, but he wasn't very nice. Saul hated anyone who loved Jesus. You see, Saul had never met Jesus, so one day Jesus met Saul. It's not about keeping rules, Paul told people. You don't have to be good at being good for God to love you. You just have to believe what Jesus has done and follow him. Because it's not about trying, it's about trusting. It's not about rules, it's about grace. God's free gift that cost him everything. What happened to Paul? He met Jesus. He even changed his name from Saul to Paul, which means small and humble, the very opposite of proud. This is a great passage to be thinking about. And my first thought in reading it is, wow, as a lawyer, as someone who looks to pursue justice and settle accounts and this kind of thing, that I'm also someone who's good at keeping the rules and can become very legalistic, not just in my professional life, but in my faith life. And so this is a great reminder that Paul's encounter with Jesus is about trusting not what you do on your own effort. It's not about the rules, and it is about grace. Leaning into grace means embracing humility. And in some ways, to tie it back to the conversation we've been having, when we can see ourselves as the recipients of grace, that we're bit players in this really big cosmic story, and what a gift it is to be a part of it, that we can be less anxious and less fearful and less controlling, and know that we're being used in small ways for a much bigger story, and embrace that as the gift that it is.
You can get the Jesus Storybook Bible wherever books are sold. To find out more about the book and all of Sally's other books, please visit Sally at sallylloyd-jones.com and follow her on Instagram at Sally Lloyd Jones and at Jesus_Storybook_Bible.
Before we go, don't forget, God loves you with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. Oh, hello, it's me again, Sally. I'm just popping back briefly to say 2 things. The first thing is, don't forget to subscribe to the show, because that way you'll get the stories straight to your phone. And the other thing is, while we're at it, would you rate the show and leave us a review? That would be so great, because it helps other people find the show too. I really appreciate your help. Thank you.